The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
the enthusiast.
Kia ora tātou, this is Gone by Lunchtime. That was Ben Thomas chortling about... What were you laughing about there?
Nothing.
Lollies.
Laughing about lollies. Hello, Ben from Exceltium. How are you?
Hello, I'm great.
Excellent. Annabelle Lee from the Hui.
Kia
Merry
ora.
Christmas. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
And
Paiana.
Waimihir Rose is here again.
She is.
Before we start... disclosure has been an issue this year for many people. It's important that we acknowledge any potential conflict. And there's something I think I should raise. Waimihir Rose, you were on Saturday morning literally in the clutches of the Prime Minister. I think that was seen by a number of people. What do you have to say for yourself? Also in the grip of the Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard.
She was,
Are you going to speak on her behalf as her agent?
I can
Annabelle?
do. She also spent a significant amount of time with Dame Susan Devoy.
I see.
Yeah, so I don't think she should be making any comments today,
It's
Toby.
probably better if she just...
Yeah, I think she should sit
Zips
this
it.
one out.
Zip it, sweetie.
Yeah, she's seriously compromised.
You know, ever since his successful stunt in the chamber over the extension of parental leave where Trevor Mallard held a baby in the Speaker's chair while the mother spoke in Parliament, since then I don't think he's been captured on film without a small child in his arms.
It's
the opposite. Some politicians kind of put away their drink as soon as cameras come out, and Mallard just snatches the nearest child. I was at the press gallery party down in Wellington on Thursday. He was holding a baby there.
Yeah.
It was like in the midst of all these drunken journalists and politicians.
And
nobody brings a baby to the gallery party. He must have like a store of them in his office or something.
He should get a lap dog. That would be an alternative. People carrying sort of just general pets, maybe stoats or other vermin into the house. It's just a thought. This is the last Gone by Lunchtime for 2017. There's still to come though the Superpod that we've already recorded. We did it a while ago. I don't know when it's going to go, but probably after this. So
Like a KFC family feast size pod.
like a family feast KFC size pod. Madeline Chapman is over there. Hi, Mad. Hey. She's not very well because she overdid it at her brother's 40th birthday party in Wellington over the weekend. Is that fair, Matt? Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. 2017. It's been sort of normally at this point of the year we'd all be feeling like everything was laid back and tapering out for the year, but they're still in Parliament. What are they doing?
They were in Parliament on Friday in urgency to pass the government's new families package.
Yes.
So yeah, there's this 100 days of action, which seems to be the fashion for new governments to announce. When I say the fashion, I mean it happened this year and it happened 9 years ago, so it's quite a fad. And this is, to get the government off to sort of start with great momentum, getting their program in place for the next 3 years. And the problem with the 100 days of action is that you generally don't have anything ready on the first day. Laws take a while to draft, and so there tends to be a bit of a a lag. We're about, 50 days in? 50 days in, I think. And
that was fast.
Well, I think they also... I mean, they're counting all the Christmas... See, I wouldn't be counting stats. I'd say we're not counting the statutory... We're not counting the weekends. And so, we won't count Thursdays, just to sort of extend that 100 days out a bit.
I don't know that you can count on the electorate being familiar with the Acts Interpretation Act or
the days
in terms of working days.
So it's kind of February the 4th or 5th or something, isn't it, that the 100 days ends? Something like that? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
How many days in January?
But what was your point? Your point was that...
So what happens is, for instance, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen from the opposition a bit of this procedural carping, which the public loves to hear about. Whether there's enough bills on the order paper, and that the government has been filibustering. That is buying time.
They can't get enough of standing orders debates.
It's we saw a lot of media companies saw that there was really outsized, hugely increased interest in the New Zealand election in terms of their readerships on their websites, in terms of viewing. I think one stat I heard was 10,000 people watched James Shaw's announcement that no one was resigning one night at Parliament during the campaign on Facebook Live. So huge interest in politics coming into the election and in the immediate aftermath before the government was announced. And now politicians are doing their best to dampen that down by talking about standing orders, house procedure, filibustering in the order paper as much as possible.
Annabelle, first 100 days, how's it going from where you're watching?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Looks all right. I thought the family package was something to do with Koro Trev's childcare services that he was offering in Parliament. But I think like Ben says, any optimism that you might have felt has been sucked out by the opposition and their behaviour, and it just seems like it's quite chaotic and petulant down there at the moment. I'm curious to see how long it lasts for too. Do you think they'll be able to maintain this level of belligerence for a whole 3 years, Ben, or do you think the novelty will wear off and they'll let Labour get on with it, or...
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, the clue is in the name, which is the opposition. And they're obviously going, they don't have any obligation to try and advance Labour's agenda. In fact, they stand opposed to, large parts of it, like getting rid of tax cuts and extending benefits in some respects, because, of course, National was, campaigned on extending benefits themselves. But what we're seeing with all of this sort of procedural kind of manoeuvring and trying to stymie the government, it's kind of filling a vacuum, which is because, as we said, it takes a while to get legislation drafted, takes a while for ministers to get their feet under their desks, get ready the terms of reference for all the inquiries, including the Ngā Morahu one that they've promised, and now we're in that phase where they've sort of, the machinery of government has kind of geared up and it's in motion. Things are being introduced into the House. The policies are beginning to take actual shape rather than just the sort of vague kind of campaign promises. They're being translated into actual law, actual policy. And once that starts, the opposition doesn't really stand a chance. The resources of government are vastly greater than that of the opposition. Because of the sort of the vagaries of how our parliament works, as opposed to, say, certain institutions in the United States, you can't actually just filibuster and delay bills forever. We have standing orders that prevent that. And eventually this kind of messing around with procedure that we've seen, 6,000 written questions lodged to kind of gum up the works in ministerial offices will just fall away, because it's actually much harder for the opposition to maintain their intensity than it is for the government, which has just armies of civil servants, huge amounts of staff.
Apparently, Nick Smith raised a point of order the other day because Adrian Rudawhi had told the House to e noho after he told them to sit down twice and they wouldn't.
And then what was Adrian Rudawhi's response? He
told them to sit down twice and they wouldn't, and then he said, e noho I nai nei, and everyone did, and then Nick Smith got up and raised a point of order about it, about how it was inappropriate to use te reo in the House if you weren't going to translate it. blah, blah, blah.
And Raffaele said, well, it worked.
He said it worked, and actually I'd already told you twice in English to sit down, so it was technically translated.
When we look at 2017, certainly as far as the political drama is concerned, like, I don't think it began until July the 16th. I think it was July the 16th. Greens AGM, Metiria Turei gave a speech in part designed to cut through the general wash of political argument, and it achieved that, and it sort of changed everything. Annabelle, did anything happen before then? I don't know.
What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think that was an outstanding example. We actually had her on the Hui the day before, and she talked about how she was getting ready to deliver the most important speech, I think she said, or policy of her lifetime.
Right.
And gosh, if we'd known then that it was going to end so catastrophically, you know. And again, that's exactly what it was. Like, obviously, delivered with the best intentions, but just an absolute fuck up of the highest order in terms of the way it was strategised and played out. And again, as I say, it's just a real shame to have lost such an experienced, articulate Māori politician as Metiria.
The world of politics losses the world of arts gain. She's now sort of a few weeks into an art course, isn't she?
Yeah, apparently. Fine arts, eh?
Think
Is she
so.
doing taniko or pew, something like that? Yeah, some sort of Māori weaving major, I've heard.
Do you have any views on the New Zealand art scene, Ben?
Well, I worked for a Minister of the Arts for 6 years.
Oh, during the golden age?
Yeah, during the golden age of New Zealand arts.
Interesting how that became almost a meme, didn't it? I don't know. Was that Chris Finlayson's idea?
Lots of hashtags.
Yeah, he was on the Twitter doing those, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that the 2-day speech, a fuck up of the highest order, is Annabelle's remark. Hang on a sec.
Sorry, it's really hot.
For those who can't see, Toby is just pulling a mallard.
I was handed the baby. I didn't grab the baby.
I just had to take my jacket off.
The fuck up of the highest order.
Yeah, look, a happy mistake for the left. It all's well that ends well. But I think in terms of what Metiria Turei was trying to do, which was this was at the stage where Labour's support was basically cratering, falling off a cliff. And New Zealand First and the Greens were fighting over basically the corpse, just sort of pickpocketing, any remaining support that Labour had.
Yeah.
And New Zealand First were going centrist, Greens were going left. I think there was a huge amount of hubris involved in Metiria's speech. As Annabelle said, she described it as the most important speech of, her life or someone's life. Well, actually, if you think of it, she's been praised retrospectively for bringing up the issues of child poverty and benefits. Well, Jacinda Ardern had been in Parliament for about 8.5 years at that stage, and that had been her primary policy plank, had been addressing child poverty. Hone Harawira was so successful in raising the issue of child poverty that he actually forced the government to, bring in that sort of slightly gimmicky but nonetheless, real breakfasts in schools program. So this idea that sort of Metiria just had a brainstorm and decided that she bravely was going to address the issue of child poverty in New Zealand, I think it's very wrong, and I think it's a bit conceited.
I think the difference, though, is that it was coming from, a lived experience point of view that, and obviously she must have been cognizant that it was
or
a
at least
risk,
inspired
but not
by true
quite,
events, as it turned out.
But not quite as, didn't realise how much of a risk it would be.
I thought it was interesting in a lot of the commentary at the time and afterwards. Poor old Green staffers came in for a bit of flack. A lot of people said, the real failure here was the people who failed to advise Metiria of the risks involved, failed
one of those
to
people.
prepare the ground. Green staffers also came for a bit of flack later in the year when they failed to properly vet the bios of one of their candidates. And most political parties' candidates write their own bios, but the Greens seem to be a massive exception to that. and the thing is, if the co-leader of a party is dead set on a course, you can guarantee that staff would have pointed things out to her. But as we saw in the aftermath of the speech, when more information came to light, which maybe cast a bit of doubt on the bona fides of the full extent of her story, or at least changed the context for it, I think. Metiria was dead set on her course. She wasn't changing it for anyone. And I think it's wrong to kind of blame other people.
I still don't understand that though. So what are we saying, that because she had a mother-in-law who had a high profile and earned a good income, that she didn't struggle at university? I still think that argument's weak, and I'm sure that obviously her mother-in-law wouldn't allow her moko to starve, but that doesn't mean that she didn't struggle.
I agree with that. I think that where I'm looking at it, with whoever's responsible for it, one of the simplest things that seems, with benefit of hindsight, yes, but surely in terms of basic political management, you would have been into wins the day or the week before.
I totally
settled
agree.
The bill.
Absolutely.
Shown that you were, just a drawing a line thing rather than the scenes of kind of going on like a kind of chastened person the week afterwards and so on.
And that is the hubris, and absolutely, yeah, she should have found out a specific dollar amount, paid it off, and then, ran that angle, but as we all know.
We had on the spin-off website, spinoff.co.nz, a bunch of people saying who were the winners and losers of the years, the champs and the flops. You, Annabelle, had Jacinda Ardern second. I think you had her first, did you, Ben? Okay. We probably don't need to dwell on it too much, but Jacinda Ardern's year, which is kind of what followed on and the two dominoes on from that Metiria Turei speech, when the Greens surged, Labour plummeted a bit further, Little fell on his sword, Ardern stepped in, and then boom.
Boom. Jacinda mania.
Yeah.
What a magnificent, as Nicola Keane said, she managed to fit a whole career arc into 12 months, and that's right. That's exactly right. And I think at a time where the leader of the free world is Donald Trump, it's really nice that we have an articulate, smart wahine leading our country. I think it's very timely.
You're a bit Jacinda-phoric as well, aren't you, Ben?
Yeah, look, an amazing year. Started off with the Mount Albert by-election, then denied that she had deputy leadership aspirations. There's been this process of virtuously falling upwards, kind of denying any ambition and then hitting it out of the park when she's sort of thrust into these roles. Do
you not think that's sincere, Ben? Because my impression is that is sincere.
Yeah. I think it probably is, and it's the impression that I've had of Jacinda Ardern this year is that probably no one really knew how good she was, including her own party, until the time came. And I think we saw that at that first sort of triumphal press conference she gave on assuming the leadership, where you had kind of her advisors sort of whispering things behind her, and she would just ignore them, and just slave the whole thing. Yeah,
it could easily have been. I mean, given Grant Robertson has been doing a little bit in the House as well, that could easily have been one of the major tropes of the first days of the Labour government.
That will
Grant Robertson whispering in people's ears like some, Svengali.
It will be remembered as one of the most impressive press conferences of all time, surely. She just absolutely smashed it, didn't she?
I mean, two important pieces of intel about the Prime Minister's performance so far. My nana in Fielding is delighted that we have this new Prime Minister who's a 37-year-old woman, because she thinks that the young people are our future.
Oh.
And my mother, who lives in Sydney, also reports that everyone...
Shout out to Fielding. Also Sydney.
And Sydney, yeah. Everyone in Sydney thinks that Jacinda Ardern is doing great.
Kia ora.
Bill English, meanwhile, I think you had him in your champs. I sort of had him sneaking in as a fourth. What do we think of Bill English's year? I mean, he outperformed expectations too, didn't he? He got up again.
He really did. He really did. I think he this has been the best version of Bill English that we've seen. And, it's unlucky, isn't it? Because he did win the majority of the vote. So, you could say that he was hard done by. But I think he let himself down when he didn't come out and defuse that little hand grenade that Joyce lobbed at the 11th hour in the election campaign, I think, in terms of his credibility.
The 11.7 billionth hour, even.
Well played, Toby. I think he let himself down there. And it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around. When you've been in Parliament that long, what do you do?
Yeah, well, he's not that old though, right? Was he 50?
He's still got a few years until he's 60.
So I tend to think he'll stick around myself.
Ben, how did the year of English look to you?
I think one of the great shames of the three-term national government will be that the split was 8 years for Key and 1 for English. I think maybe 6-3 or 5-4 might have been a better result for New Zealand. Because...
Well, it's for excellent maths.
Key's departure was...
Just kind of dance with it. Sorry, Karen. Just writing this down.
Key's departure was this sort of opportunity to kind of look back on 2 2/3 at the time terms of national, and where they came in was promising to close the income gap with Australia, and all the sorts of grand promises you make as a first term government. And I think ultimately Key left with not that much of a legacy that you'll remember, particularly not one that you could attach to him personally. I think a lot of his ministers leave with legacies, and I think English is chief amongst those. And I think he brought a real kind of concentration to the office of Prime Minister as actually somewhere where you can drive policy direction across government, which we saw with the social investment, which had been kind of on a slow boil for about 8 years and really got cranked up when Bill, had that control over all of government from that sort of big chair, which is something that Key didn't really use the office for. He didn't have a vision in the same way. I thought he campaigned great. He, unlike probably Key, he was able to pivot, back towards child poverty when Jacinda was making a lot of ground on that. I don't think he's got anything to be ashamed of.
It's interesting because when Key resigned, I thought, wow, National are really going to get a hiding now. And I thought we'd see them start to fall in the polls quite rapidly. Third term government, nothing very sexy happening. New Zealand, arguably at an all-time low in terms of child poverty, just poverty in general, because if there's poor kids, there's poor adults. Housing, all of those issues, and yet they managed to hold on. Is that though? I'm not sure if that's because English was such a great leader, or if we've just become really apathetic. But he managed to hold on, didn't he? Like, we didn't see a big immediate slide that a lot of people perhaps might have expected.
No, there was no. There could have been a tailspin if things had sort of fallen away in any sizable way, but they didn't. Yeah,
National's vote's been remarkably consistent over 4 elections now.
Still is. And here's the rub. They, in the Colmar Brunton, I think they finished on 46, did they? The Colmar Brunton the weekend before last. And Bill English has kind of historic highs for a beaten, like his preferred PM is 33, something like that, I can't remember exactly. And yet everyone is talking about whether or not he can remain as leader. He's got this incredible, for an opposition party, the first ever under MMP opposition party, is the biggest party in Parliament. Most people saying he had put in a good show. Not everyone. Simon Wilson is a sending voice, for example, in our spin-off collection of views, and doing quite well in those rankings. And yet we're all talking about whether or not he can survive. I mean, it just feels to me like the momentum is... It's not so much whether or not he can
survive. I think it's more whether or not he chooses to
You think?
stay.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
You think? What do you think, Ben? Do you think if he was determined to stick it out, he could?
If he wanted to lead National into the next election, I think he could.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll want to. I think he'll stick around for probably another year or so.
I mean, well, no. See, I mean, I said this on the last podcast, I think, but it felt to me just somehow that reshuffle that wasn't really a reshuffle. Everyone just stay where you are, look after your own stall, seemed a bit like a holding pattern and some, useful functional opposition. People know their portfolios, but it needs a refresh at some time. And whether he can do a refresh that doesn't involve finding a kind of capturing that sense of some generational shift is, I think, what do you think? When we're here.
Tobe, can I ask a question, or
Yeah.
is that going to derail the podcast?
There's nothing to derail. We're just...
What do you guys think of the Golriz thing? Do you think it's a big deal?
My main
The
issue
CV?
with it was that it wasn't a selfie, that picture wasn't a selfie, and everyone was calling it a selfie. Otherwise, I don't think there was too much in it. I think it was one of those things where it was obviously foolish in it. When we're here, just is refusing to stay quiet.
I'll give her a kai.
Here we go. So I felt that obviously there was a little bit of kind of massaged copy around, and people want to sort of hear the hero story, but it seemed to me kind of disproportionate, some of the response to it. This is for people who don't read Twitter a lot. Basically, where it mostly occurred, the Golriz Garraman, the Green MP.
I think it was in the Herald 4 days in a row.
It was in the Herald 4 days in a row, really?
Radio New Zealand were all over it as well. I felt like it was a bit over the top myself.
No, it definitely dominated headlines, which I think where if you're the Greens and you're in government for the first time, that's probably where you want your backbench MP to be.
The story, just in case anyone didn't see it, was centred around Golriz Garraman's account of her time working as a lawyer, in part as an intern, for war crimes charges being laid against some Wandan characters, and whether or not she was on the defence team or not, or just the prosecution. That's a very crappy summary. But basically, Ben, what was your view on it? Shrugging.
No,
He's struggling.
I mean, no strong feelings about it. I think that I think it's always going to be a bit unsettling when people see you sort of smiling for photos with genocide-accused people.
That's discomforting.
I think most lawyers wouldn't pose with their defendants for sort of smiling photos, but that's who knows what goes on. And like you say, people massage their bios. This one, I think there was like a certain overemphasis on certain aspects. And I think, as we adverted to earlier, I wasn't totally comfortable with the way that staff were immediately blamed. This was the bio was seen as incorrect on the website, and suddenly that was staff's fault, and the MP/candidate had never seen the copy before, and that seems pretty implausible to me. We can't overlook Winston Peters, who had a big year too.
He had quite a big year, didn't he?
The Kingmaker.
He was almost going to be Prime Minister. Going back to about, May?
Apart from the kind of moments of Winstonian special, like that incredible press conference where he raged against the media during the negotiations, and also a few things that
I was trying to remember which one.
Well, there was that was particularly
raged against media. Now, which one?
Narrow it down.
Are we talking about the one almost immediately after the election where he summoned the gallery to
the theatre,
the Beehive Theaterette, with the Prime Minister, which is reserved for the Prime Minister, making announcements, and they were there under the impression that he might be telling them who the next government would be or process about the coalition talks, and instead he just began by reading a Dominion Post editorial that he didn't like.
He told them why they're all idiots. Yeah. But as far as the process goes, well, it was obviously frustrating for people who were kind of had become adrenaline-filled during the election campaign and wanted more. Wasn't it actually a very disciplined process in which there were almost no leaks that emerged, in which arrangement was reached that didn't seem like it wildly disproportionately represented this so-called Kingmaker party? Was done in 3 weeks and a bit. Seemed quite efficient and effective and responsible.
I feel like
compared
he must
to Germany, for example.
Yeah, I feel like Winston must have really taken on board the criticisms of 96, and, you know, we all know how that relationship worked out. And I do think that, you know, once he is in that position, once he is in that position, that he, you know, there's a gear shift with him, and he does take a very responsible approach. I think my only criticism would be that he set the deadline, which then set up an expectation that he would meet the deadline, and he was very certain whenever he was questioned about the deadline that he would meet it, and the question of whether or not was ridiculous, and then he didn't.
And so he refused to simply say, I shouldn't have been so black and white about it. Of course, we need to be grown-ups. He just has to.
Yeah, we need to give ourselves some wriggle room, because you know, but you know, the whole thing of we can't fly the board in, and you know, they're coming from the ends of the earth, a la Bluff or whatever, was a bit implausible, and I just think next time maybe don't be so sold on what a specific date
next time.
If there is a next time, God forbid.
The NZ First Board, they were the surprising kind of stars of the post-election.
People profiling the NZ First Board.
Well, unsuccessfully, there didn't seem to be. I mean, we know that now there is a New Zealand First Board. We know that a day after Winston told us about them, there has been a New Zealand First Board. Where they were, or you know, what its composition was prior to that.
Kept in a crypt,
sort of after
underneath
scouring RSAs across the country, kind of signing people up at closing time. Or
briefly,
that was the only other ridiculous statement I thought too during those negotiations is please respect the privacy of the board. They are not public figures. Well, I'm sorry, but if you get to decide which party becomes the next government, then you are most definitely a public figure and therefore open to scrutiny.
And I'm sure it was entirely them that did decide. Briefly, in your champs list, Annabelle Lee, you listed Susan Devoy of the Human Rights Commission, Race Relations Commissioner, for her unrelenting pursuit of justice for ngā mōrehu, survivors of state abuse. Do you want to tell us what... do you want to touch on that briefly and tell us what to look out for next year for that? Do we need to have a Royal Commission, or will a stock inquiry do?
I think it should be a Royal Commission. It does need to have, it needs to be independent, because, you know, this is not new to anyone. This isn't something that's just recently come to light. You know, governments have known about this issue for a long, long time. And so, you know, arguably you could say that they're all, you know, they've all been tarred by this issue by not dealing with it earlier. So I think it's really important that it is an independent inquiry and far-reaching. One of the reasons Susan Devoy is my champ too is because, in all honesty, when she was appointed to the office of the human rights, what is she, commissioner, conciliator,
used
commissioner, now it's
yeah.
commissioner. I was somewhat sceptical, having not come from a background of advocacy in that area. And she just continues to surprise me in the most wonderful way with her commitment and what an amazing job she's done. So one of the things I'll be keeping an eye on is, you know, whether or not she's reappointed to that position. I hope she is.
It comes up in the next
She was
few
a
months,
national appointment, but it'll be interesting to see whether Labour keeps her on. And I talked to her in the weekend, and one of the things she mentioned is that she wants to make more resources available for ngā mōrehu to establish their own support group. And I thought that was such a refreshing approach. You know, usually it'd be like there'd be some other group that, team of experts, academics and social workers getting brought in to set up a support group for them. And her attitude is that it should be them who are just given the resources to do what they think is best, And I think that's exactly what those survivors need, is to be empowered to make decisions for themselves and be resourced to do that.
So great appointment by Judith Collins, as we all said at the time. Really good, brave, bold, important appointment of Susan Devoy. Let's scroll down to next year. We can go through. There are all the villains as well that we listed, but let's not labour those. Who needs to rub salt into the wound of Jonathan Coleman?
Can we talk about the Māori Party, though?
Yeah, let's talk about the Māori Party. Lance O'Sullivan, is this the bit you want to talk about? I mean, it's kind of it's very surprising that it seems a surprising approach to announce that he'll be leader, but he won't do the co-leadership thing, and I'm not sure that comes across super well in terms of the kaupapa of the Māori Party.
A little bit tone deaf. Yeah, it's interesting because within wider New Zealand, he is very much seen as a hero, obviously New Zealander of the Year, and undoubtedly he has done some incredible work in his community in the far north in terms of healthcare, and is a staunch advocate of vaccinating your kids, and he's absolutely spot on right. But within Te Ao Māori, he is quite a polarising figure, and as much as he is loved, there are also people who are deeply sceptical about his motivations, and there's a growing group of Māori who are anti-vaccination and that sort of thing. And I just think for him to make I think having a co-leader alongside him is a good thing to help to neutralise that somewhat, and it is very much the kaupapa of the Māori Party, mana tāne, mana wahine. So to come in before you've even been elected and start making those sorts of pronouncements, I think really doesn't do much to win hearts within the party and within the wider community, I would have thought. But it's the Māori Party. It's not good times for them. I thought that letter that Tuku sent the other day, and some of Marama's comments on the Nation the other day, it doesn't.
Who stood down as
party president and called upon Te Ururua and Marama to do the same thing. Clearly, Marama's not keen to stand down at all. So, I can't help but think that things are still imploding there.
Yeah, it seems like a long road back for that party. Ben, anything to add to that?
No, no party's ever left Parliament and then come back apart from Winston.
Winston's done it twice. Once. Once the party went under 5 and he held on with an electorate. So
but he's only left Parliament one time, which was in 2008. Got about 4.3% of the vote or something. Yeah. So there was always still a reasonable position of strength. I think going out with 1.2% of the vote and no electorates. That's an incredible road back. You've
got to win an electorate to get back in.
Yeah, and look, the Māori Party did get a bit of funding. They did get a bit of resource from often donors who were quite sympathetic to National and saw the Māori Party as an ally. That's gone now. They won't get any sort of accommodations from any other parties. I think it seems impossible.
It's just shitty time to be a small party generally, right? I mean, there is no, New Zealand First are barely above the 5. The Greens had a terrible year in terms of their numbers. They have to try and restore their base. ACT are irrelevant, and National Party.
They're barely a party, ACT. Let's be honest.
Well, they're an electorate. The life support
they're an
electorate
MP. They're not a party.
But there, and there's talk about whether or not National needs to kind of patronise or somehow create its own
a client party.
Yeah, which is also, that whether or not people will respond to that positively it seems highly unlikely to me. But MMP was meant to be all about the smaller parties.
Yeah, although you do have 2 in government, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting observation. This is the least MMP parliament we've had since 1996, but it's the most MMP government.
Sure.
In the sense that the largest party isn't in government. The Greens, and I think the Prime Minister has been very cognizant of that. The way she's structured the government. She could have probably gotten away with giving the Greens one ministerial slot outside cabinet, give them DIA or maybe conservation, but she's really brought them into the tent and really brought New Zealand First in. So they're all very sort of interlinked. Polling-wise, it's always tough for minor parties, particularly in government. And they won't mind, New Zealand First won't mind dropping down to about 2 or 3% between elections. As long as they can come back.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that both Labour and National haven't really got their head around MMP in terms of how to be a good big coalition partner, how to be a good partner to the minor parties, so that you do have someone to couple up with afterwards. And I think that's where we'll see again a generational shift with Jacinda, who hasn't been a part of a first past the post system.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how they balance all that out next year. Speaking of next year, the issues that you, Annabelle, picked as being important ones that New Zealand politics might hinge on a bit is Labour's ability to provide speedy solutions to the housing crisis and child poverty, the Ngāpuhi settlement, and whether or not Labour trips into an $11 billion hole.
Oh, I think
there are very many O's, very many O's in the word hole. Do you want to expand on any of that?
I think all of those are pretty self-explanatory, aren't they? Ngāpuhi's an important one because, of course, they are our largest iwi, and we all know that, they're doing it tough in the north. And let's hope that this huge block of Northern Māori MPs that we have makes a huge difference for them. One of the issues that I'm personally interested in, and I didn't mention it in that piece, is what Ron Marks does as Minister of Defence. And the reason I'm interested in that is because of a number of stories that we've done over the years, particularly about two brothers, the Nepata brothers, who were both horrifically injured while serving in the New Zealand Army. One became a paraplegic when he was dropped during an exercise, and the other one was horrifically burned in a tank accident in Waioru, and neither of them have ever received any decent compensation. And theirs was a case that was actually championed by Ron Marks, so it'll be interesting to see if now that he's a minister, if he will do the right thing by the Nepata brothers. And another one is the story of Doug Hughes, who was the young Māori soldier who committed suicide in Afghanistan, and there's never been a proper coronial inquiry into what happened to Dougie Hughes. It's an incredibly sad story. So I hope too that Ron steps up on that one and gives his whānau the hearing that they've been asking for their boy.
And it's worth just mentioning as a footnote to that some of those stories, the later ones you did on the Hui, which has been returning to television next year for how many episodes?
Season 3, 40 episodes kicking off in March, and our lovely treaty partners at News Hub are also going to be giving us a replay on a Monday night, I believe.
You won some gong at the TV Awards as well?
We won a gong. We won Best Māori Program, and we were finalists for Best Current Affairs Program, so we were really chuffed about that.
And Ben, you're working on your new series, the spin-off TV, which we can reveal exclusively here, is going to take the form of 2 hours every evening. Ben Thomas on his phone.
7 till 9.
Just 7 till 9, reflecting on the day's events. Excited about that.
It's the future of television. I like to think of it as like John Campbell's Checkpoint, but without a microphone and much longer.
Yeah.
Will you actually talk to it, or just be your thoughts, just be your reflections on?
And sometimes contemplative silence. I mean, sometimes you don't want to be overburdened by monologue.
Like Leighton Smith. We haven't even mentioned Leighton Smith. I can't believe we haven't mentioned Leighton Smith, who does the best pauses. So let's go. And I will... No, I won't mention that. I won't get into that. I won't get into that because they'll roast me. I won't get into that. News Talk ZB.
Jacinda's barely been Prime Minister for about, 7 weeks. Hosking's gone from 7 sharp. Leighton Smith is moving on.
It's a bonfire.
It's like it's just like a rain of fire on like the talkback, the FM talkback hosts of New Zealand.
It's outrageous. Ben Thomas, your issues for 2018: the global retreat from open borders, rules-based, blah blah blah, housing, still. Tax and the cost of living. What for New Zealand rather than the collapse of the world order? Tell us more.
Well, I was probably wrong. I probably should have put in as Annabelle did the $11.7 billion hole, which is not actually a hole, but as we saw in the half-yearly economic and fiscal update on Thursday, the government has not left itself a lot of room for any spending that hasn't already been costed in its campaign promises. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on them. Next year's budget will probably be fine. This is just a practice for my monologue, isn't it? My nightly sort of 2 hour.
I'm listening. Toby's busy playing with Waimahia, but I'm hanging off your every word. But that'll really start to bite in 2019, 2020, where they'll find it a lot harder to come up with new spending promises, new initiatives, to get them through to the next election, and anything that the coalition partners are asking for that was outside the agreement as well. And in terms of tax and cost of living, the tax working group will be starting in the new year.
Tax
are you on
working
that?
group. I love a good working group. They haven't announced all the...
hopefully.
Yeah.
But no one's been...
Do they have your email address?
At Ben Thomas NZ on Twitter, if you're trying to find him.
But yeah, so I think that'll focus people's minds on capital gains taxes, changes to the tax system, possible tax rises. I think the opposition will start bashing that, especially given how tight the budget is. So that could cause a few problems for the government next year.
It's really hot in this studio. Let's wind it up. Let's call it a year. Is there anything we've missed out? Anything that you guys are burning to mention? Fine. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything.
I thought just in terms of really current events, Gillian Genter, she's had a good start.
Yes.
Very
assured. Yeah, she knows her onions.
Very assured, and her first announcement wasn't anything about cycling tracks or any kind of green stuff. It was about safety on rural roads,
right?
Which I thought was a smart decision.
Yeah,
right. To continue as you mean to go on. Reassure people that it's not sort of a whole new change. Shows that she knows what she's doing, and I think got a shout out on Radio New Zealand for being a good employer as well.
This podcast has been a lot of fun this year. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, Annabelle. Thank you so much, Ben. We'll return in the new year.
Can we do one final shout out?
Oh, wait. Yeah, of course.
Mad's election coverage was probably the best of any of ours.
Oh, Mad Chapman.
With her memes.
She's had an incredible year. She has a very good year.
Big fan.
We're very lucky to have her, as we are both of you, as we are you, Waimahia Rose, as we are you, listener. And let's go out with what should we sing?
Are we going to
do you want to lead us off? And
like that nation thing where they...
Oh, is that too obvious?
I reckon we should do it. I think we should sing.
You think we should or shouldn't?
No, I don't think we should.
Okay.
Can we rap? Can you rap?
I can't rap.
Okay.
We'll see you in 2018.
Just play air guitar.
Oh, can you put something over the top of this to make it sound less embarrassing, Mad? Thanks, Mad.
Talo for Lover. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spinoff Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBit.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.